The Dragonback series by Timothy Zahn. Book 2, Dragon and Soldier. Chapter 11. The chatter of gunshots filled the air. The deeper, slower rhythm of heavier weaponry and small explosions added counterpoint, the noise echoing from the sides of the buildings. The entire column of soldiers was under attack. And like the raw recruit that he was, Jack just stood there in the middle of it. "Move!" Draco snarled, his whole body aching for action. An attack. Soldiers being shot at and probably killed where they stood. Civilians possibly caught in the line of fire with nowhere to escape to. And he, a poet warrior of the Kada, lying uselessly in two-dimensional form against Jack's skin. It was a horrible situation. A horrible, shameful situation. For a Kada warrior in the midst of combat to sit idly by, not lifting a claw to help, was a violation of all he'd ever stood for. But he had no choice. To move now was to give in to the urge to defend and protect, and would doom the Kada and Shan team to ultimate destruction. Because if the unknown enemies who had slaughtered his advance party ever learned that someone had survived, they would hunt him down like a newborn cub. And when he died, the last chance to warn the refugee fleet would be gone. But even as his frustration rose like poison in his throat, Jack finally freed himself from his stunned paralysis. "What do I do?" he hissed, breaking into a run toward the edge of the street. "Find cover!" Dracos told him. Sliding along Jack's body, he got a claw beneath the collar of the boy's shirt and popped open the ceiling seam. Bad enough being trapped here unable to help, without being mostly blind, too. He ran the claw down far enough to open the shirt to mid-chest and peered out. It was about as bad a place to be caught in an ambush as he could have asked for. All around them, medium-tall buildings provided high ground for the attackers, and they were taking full advantage of it. A cloud of drifting smoke was starting to collect overhead by the rooftops, and he could see muzzle flashes from several windows. Most of the attacks seemed to be coming from three buildings, the three-story structure next to the building Jack was headed toward, plus the two four-story ones across the street from it. He could also see now that the city was surrounded by forested hills, more high ground, probably the source of the deeper and more distant sounds of heavy weapons. The enemy had planned their attack well. There was a jarring thud as Jack reached the building and slammed hard into the wall beside a large decorative planter with a red-blue bush sprouting out of it. "I don't think I like this," the boy muttered in a shaky voice as he fumbled his Gompers flash rifle off his shoulder and dropped into a squat beside the planter. "How in—" He broke off as an angry face suddenly filled Dracos' field of view. The Kada froze in place, but the Wynyard's Edge mercenary wasn't interested in dragon tattoos just then. "Give me that!" he barked, snatching the rifle from Jack's grip. Holding it across his chest, he took off to the left. "Oh, that's terrific," Jack muttered, curling into a tight ball behind the planter. "Now what?" Dracos raised his head from Jack's skin far enough to press an eye through the open gap in his shirt and caught a glimpse of the mercenary as he disappeared around the corner of the building. The man's own machine gun, he noted, was still bouncing against his back. "He wanted a long-range weapon to use against the hillside attackers," he decided. "His own weapon is for closer work." "Right," Jack groused, curling up in a little tighter ball. "Like there isn't enough to shoot at here." He had a point. Gunfire was pouring down from the three buildings Dracos had already identified as being held by the enemy. The Edgemen were returning fire, but they were pinned down and mostly without cover. Even as he watched, three of them tried to charge the door of one of the buildings, only to be scattered back by a peppering of small explosions. Fortunately, most of the civilians seemed to have vanished. Some had ducked into walkways and alleys, or else had taken refuge inside buildings not held by the enemy. Those outside the immediate battle zone were running in all directions, their brightly colored outfits bouncing like flowers in a stiff wind. And then, as Dracos looked over the top of the planter, his eyes caught a horrible sight. Three parapins, one tall and two very short, were huddled together in obvious terror against the side of Jack's building. A mother and her cubs, trapped in the middle of the firefight. "There!" he said urgently.
Civilians!
What? Jack asked, not moving a muscle.
Civilians!
Dracos repeated, lifting a claw through the open shirt and pointing. Reluctantly, Jack untucked his head far enough to throw a quick glance over the planter. Okay, yeah, I see them.
Stop merely seeing and give them aid!
Dracos snapped.
Get them to cover!
What? Look, Dracos.
Do not argue!
Dracos cut him off. Small objects were starting to rain down from the enemy building's rooftops now, objects that exploded on impact. Popcorn bombs, he remembered them being called in Jack's mercenary manual, thrown by something called a popcorn machine. The three Parapins huddled even tighter together in response, the mother wrapping her arms protectively around her cubs.
You are a soldier,
Dracos said.
The job of a soldier is to protect those in danger. Now protect them!
How? Jack demanded, sounding scared and miserable. I can't even protect myself. What do you want me to do? Dracos leaned out from Jack's shirt as far as he dared. On the far side of the planter, between Jack and the Parapins, was a set of steps leading upward into an alcove. He couldn't be certain at his angle, but it looked like the alcove led up into a doorway.
That opening to your right,
he told Jack.
Move them in there. It may be a doorway that will allow you into the building. If it is not, it will at least provide cover from the popcorn bombs.
Jack shook his head. I can't, he said. It's too far. A shot slammed into the far side of the planter, nearly toppling it over onto Jack. The boy jerked, then curled even more tightly around himself.
Listen to me,
Draco said, keeping his voice quiet and steady.
The enemy is not trying to shoot civilians. If they were, those three would already be dead. We may assume they will therefore not deliberately shoot at you if you are merely trying to help them.
Jack shivered. But if no one's shooting at them, why should I do anything?
Because a random shot may still find them if they stay where they are,
Draco said.
And because it is your duty.
Beneath him, he felt Jack's muscles tense. All right, the boy said, taking a deep breath. He hunched his shoulders, taking another careful look over the top of the planter. And then, so suddenly it startled even Dracos. He was on his feet, running a zigzag path toward the Parapins. Dracos had just enough time to flatten himself onto Jack's skin before they were there. Come on, Jack urged, tugging at the mother's arm. Come on, we've got to get inside. For a second, the Parapin female just stared blankly up at him. Jack tugged at her arm again, pointing toward the stairs and the alcove. Then, just as suddenly as Jack had made his decision, the mother made hers. Scrambling upright, she grabbed her cub's hands and raced toward the alcove. Jack stayed right behind them until they reached the steps. Then, bounding up past them as they climbed, he pushed the door open and hurried them inside. The room they found themselves in took up the entire front of the building. Small round tables were laid out in what seemed to be a random pattern, with tiny colored discs neatly arranged on them. The windows were large, facing onto the street, and also to both sides. None of them had curtains or barriers of any sort. Near the center of the room was a wide staircase leading up to a second floor, with a set of curved metal railings on both sides.
Make them sit beside the staircase,
Dracos whispered to Jack.
It will give some protection from fire through the windows.
I should be out there, Jack muttered as he herded the Parapins to the side of the stairway. I should be out helping them.
You cannot,
Dracos told him firmly.
You have no weapon. You can only stay here and guard the civilians.
But those are supposed to be my comrades out there, Jack insisted. You're the one who's always talking about duty. How can I just sit here while they're getting shot at?
You cannot help them,
Dracos repeated, flicking his tongue out once through the gap in Jack's shirt. The smell of Parapin wasn't one he had tasted before, and he made a mental note of its texture.
But I can, and I will.
Jack exhaled a huff. Okay, he said. Be careful. He helped the Parapins down with their backs against the stairway wall. As he did so, he lifted his left hand over the top of the railing. Dracos was out of the sleeve in an instant, leaping onto the stairs. With his scales tingling, his battle senses fully alert, he headed up.